I quit! The shrill voice echoed through the marble foyer as the latest nanny, what was her name again, Sarah, Susan, stormed toward the front door, designer bag clutched against her chest like armor. Charlie Morgan watched from the top of the grand staircase as she fumbled with the locks, her manicured hands shaking. "Ma'am, if you could just—" His security guard started. "No, those children are animals, absolute animals!" She whirled around, her face flushed red. "In my 15 years of childcare, I have never encountered such... She gestured wildly at the destruction behind her finger paint, streaking the expensive wallpaper, what looked like cereal ground into the Persian rug, and the distinct smell of something that definitely wasn't potpourri wafting from the living room. Charlie descended the stairs slowly, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over the chaos. At 38, he commanded respect in boardrooms and back-alley deals alike, but apparently 3 4-year-old boys were beyond his expertise. "What exactly happened here, miss? That's Mrs. Henderson to you. And what happened is that your sons are completely out of control. They put glue in my hair, threw their breakfast at the wall, and one of them bit me." She thrust out her arm, showing what appeared to be tiny teeth marks. "I lasted longer than the others, but this is where I draw the line." The front door slammed so hard, the crystal chandelier tinkled ominously above them. "Hey, everyone. If you're enjoying this wild ride with Charlie and his chaos, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all. Also, if you want to see how this impossible situation gets resolved, smash that like button. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next with these triplets." Charlie stood in the sudden silence, running a hand through his dark hair. 6 nannies in 4 months. 6 highly qualified, extensively vetted, ridiculously expensive nannies, all defeated by Mason, Noah, and Luke, his beautiful, brilliant, completely uncontrollable sons. "Sir?" Marcus, his head of security, approached cautiously. "Should I contact the agency again?" "They won't send anyone else," Charlie said, his voice flat. Words gotten out. He looked at the destruction around him. Elena would have known what to do. Elena had always known what to do. But Elena had been gone 6 months now, leaving him to navigate this impossible maze of single parenthood while running one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts, not the aggressive pounding of someone demanding entry, but gentle, almost hesitant. Charlie frowned. Nobody knocked like that on his door. People either belonged here, or they didn't get past the gate. Marcus moved toward the door, hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, but Charlie held up a hand. Through the frosted glass panels, he could see a small figure, definitely female, definitely not threatening. "I'm looking for whoever just ran out of here crying." The voice was warm, slightly breathless. "She nearly knocked over my daughter on the sidewalk, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay." Charlie opened the door to find a woman in her early 30s, with shoulder-length dark hair, and the kind of genuine concern in her brown eyes that he rarely encountered in his world. She was holding the hand of a little girl with pigtails, who was looking up at his house with wide, curious eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman continued, "but that woman seemed really upset, and I just wanted to—" She stopped mid-sentence as she took in his appearance, then glanced over his shoulder at the disaster zone behind him. Oh, I think I understand what happened." Chatiri too. Sofia Martinez had seen plenty of chaos in her 32 years, working double shifts as a waitress, while raising Emma alone, watching her ex-husband drain their savings before disappearing, spending the last 3 months desperately searching for work, while their savings dwindled to nothing. But this was chaos on a completely different level. "Mommy, why does this house smell like maple syrup and feet?" Emma whispered, tugging on Sophia's worn jacket. The man standing in the doorway looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine-expensive suit, slightly rumpled, dark hair disheveled, and the kind of tired eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible situations. Behind him she could see what looked like a war zone painted in primary colors. "You said someone ran out of here crying?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight rasp that suggested he'd been doing quite a bit of yelling himself. The blonde woman in the navy suit. She was muttering something about little monsters and never again. "Nearly trampled my Emma here when she came flying down your front steps." Sophia squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly. "I'm Sophia, by the way, Sophia Martinez, and this is Emma. Charlie Morgan." He extended his hand, and Sophia noticed the firm grip, the expensive watch and the small scar across his knuckles. And the little monsters she was referring to, would be my sons. As if summoned by the mention of their names, 3 identical faces appeared around Charlie's legs, peering out at Sophia and Emma with bright blue eyes and syrup-sticky faces. They were beautiful children, all tousled brown hair and mischievous grins that probably melted hearts right before they destroyed everything in sight. "Daddy, the new lady ran away too," one of them announced cheerfully. "She screamed really loud," added another. "I didn't mean to bite her that hard," the third one said with what Sophia recognized as completely insincere remorse. Charlie closed his eyes briefly, and Sophia felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. This was a man at the end of his rope. "How many nannies have you lost?" she asked gently. 6. In 4 months. He opened his eyes and looked at her with something that might have been hope. "I don't suppose you have any experience with children?" Sophia almost laughed. Experience? She'd been raising Emma since she was born, plus she'd helped her sister with her 4 kids every summer. But looking at this clearly wealthy man in his obviously expensive home, she knew she wasn't what he was looking for. He probably wanted someone with degrees and certifications and references from other rich families. "I've got plenty of experience," she said carefully, "but I'm not— Can you start now?" The desperation in his voice was barely concealed. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes that I absolutely cannot miss, and I have no one to watch them." "Daddy," Emma piped up, "maybe the nice man needs help like when I help you with the dishes." Sophia looked down at her daughter, then back at Charlie. They were 3 days away from being evicted from their apartment. She had $47 in her checking account and no prospects for employment. This was probably a terrible idea for about 12 different reasons, but "Okay," she heard herself saying, "just for today." The relief that washed over Charlie Morgan's face was almost heartbreaking. What neither of them realized was that this single moment of desperation and kindness was about to change everything. 24 hours later, Sophia was beginning to understand why 6 professional nannies had fled screaming from the Morgan household. It wasn't just that Mason, Noah, and Luke were energetic. It was that they were strategically, brilliantly, systematically destructive, like tiny criminal masterminds with unlimited resources and no regard for consequences. "Emma, duck!" Sophia called out as a toy airplane went sailing past her daughter's head, launched by Noah from his position on top of the leather sofa. "He's got excellent aim," Emma observed with the kind of calm acceptance that came from growing up in chaos. "Better than Tommy in my class." Sophia caught the airplane and turned to find Charlie standing in the doorway of his home office, watching the scene with an expression she couldn't quite read. He'd changed from his expensive suit into dark jeans and a white button-down that somehow managed to make him look even more intimidating and attractive at the same time. "How's your conference call going?" she asked, stepping over Luke, who was currently engaged in some kind of complex floor puzzle that involved arranging toy cars in what looked like military formation. "Better than expected," Charlie said, his eyes following Mason as the boy attempted to scale the bookshelf like it was Mount Everest. "Probably because I could actually hear the other participants for once." "Daddy," Mason called from halfway up the bookshelf, "watch me be a monkey." "Mason, feet on the floor, please," Sophia said, without even looking up from where she was helping Luke with his car arrangement. Her tone was calm but firm. And to Charlie's amazement, Mason actually complied. "How did you do that?" Charlie asked. "Do what?" "Make him listen. The last nanny had to physically wrestle him down from there." Sophia shrugged, scooping up Noah as he made a break for the stairs. "You just have to understand that they're not trying to be bad. They're trying to have fun and they're testing boundaries. They want to know someone's paying attention and that they're safe." She settled Noah next to his brothers. "Besides, they miss their mom. Acting out is normal." The casual way she said it, like she understood grief, like she'd seen it before, made something twist in Charlie's chest. He studied her as she moved around his living room with easy confidence, treating his sons like they were just regular kids, instead of the tiny tornadoes that had been terrorizing his household for months. Sophia had pulled her dark hair back in a messy bun, and she was wearing jeans that had definitely seen better days, and a sweater that was clearly Emma's favorite color, purple, based on the small fingerprints decorating the sleeves. She looked nothing like the polished professional nannies he'd been hiring. She looked real. "Boys," Sophia announced, "it's almost dinner time. Who wants to help me make spaghetti?" The response was immediate and unanimous. 3 small bodies launched themselves toward the kitchen, with more enthusiasm than Charlie had seen from them in months. "You're really going to let them cook?" Charlie asked, following the parade. They're going to help, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. Emma, sweetie, can you show the boys where to wash their hands? As the children clustered around the kitchen sink, chattering excitedly about sauce and noodles and whether they could make shapes. Charlie found himself studying Sophia more intently. There was something about the way she moved, the way she anticipated what the kids needed before they even asked, that spoke of experience far beyond her years. You're really good at this, he said quietly. Sophia glanced up from where she was gathering ingredients, and for a moment, their eyes met across the kitchen. So are you when you're not trying so hard. The observation hit him like a punch to the gut, because it was true. Ever since Elena died, he'd been so desperate to be the perfect father that he'd forgotten how to just be their dad. Sophia, he started, then stopped. He'd been about to ask her to stay permanently, to make this arrangement official, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way she kept checking her phone, or the careful way she'd avoided mentioning what her previous job had been. Or maybe it was the growing realization that Sofia Martinez wasn't just good with his children, she was making him remember what his house felt like when it was a home. And that was dangerous territory for a man like him. 4. The next morning, Sophia arrived at Charlie's house to find him sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee and a stack of newspapers, still in his running gear. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and she tried not to notice the way his t-shirt clung to his shoulders. "You're early," he said, glancing up from what looked like the business section. "The boys are early risers, right?" Sophia set down her purse and noticed Emma examining the massive refrigerator with the kind of awe reserved for scientific marvels. "I figured I'd get breakfast started before they wake up and decide to make their own." Charlie's mouth quirked up in what might have been a smile. "You learn fast." As if summoned by the mention of food, 3 sets of small feet came thundering down the stairs, followed by voices engaged in what sounded like a heated debate about whether superheroes could eat regular food or if they needed special superhero breakfast. "Morning, troublemakers," Sophia said warmly, and was rewarded with 3 enthusiastic hugs that nearly knocked her over. It had only been 2 days, but they'd already claimed her as theirs in the way children did when they found someone who actually listened. "Sophia, guess what? Daddy says we can have pancakes if we're good," Noah announced. "He also says you know how to make them into shapes," Mason added hopefully. "And Luke wants Batman pancakes, but I told him Batman doesn't eat pancakes," Noah continued. "Batman totally eats pancakes," Luke protested. "He just eats them in the Batcave so the bad guys don't see him." Sophia looked over at Charlie, who was watching this exchange with the expression of someone who'd been negotiating complex peace treaties since dawn. "Pancakes it is. But first, everyone needs to get dressed properly, brush teeth, and set the table." As the boys scattered to follow orders with surprising enthusiasm, Emma settled next to Charlie at the counter. "My mom makes really good pancakes," Emma told him confidentially. "She used to make them every Sunday before—" She trailed off, glancing at Sophia. "Before what, sweetheart?" Charlie asked gently. "Before Daddy left and we had to sell our house," Emma finished matter-of-factly. Sophia's hands stilled on the pancake batter she'd been mixing. She hadn't planned on sharing their story, especially not like this. "Emma," she said quietly, "it's okay, Mommy. You always say there's no shame in telling the truth." Emma turned back to Charlie. "We live in an apartment now, but the landlord says we have to move because Mom can't find a job that pays enough. But Mom says everything happens for a reason." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Sophia whisking the batter with perhaps more force than necessary. "How long have you been looking for work?" Charlie asked, his voice carefully neutral. 3 months, Sophia replied without turning around. "I was a restaurant manager, but the place closed down. Most places want someone available nights and weekends, and I can't do that with Emma." Charlie studied her rigid posture, the way she was avoiding eye contact, and felt something click into place. This wasn't just a woman who was good with children. This was a woman who was fighting to keep her family together, who had shown up at his door at exactly the moment he needed her most. "The boys seem to love you," he said carefully. "They're good kids. They just needed someone to pay attention to what they're actually saying instead of what they're doing. And Emma seems happy here." Sophia finally turned around, her brown eyes meeting his. "Mr. Morgan, Charlie, I appreciate this temporary arrangement, but I don't want you to feel like you owe us anything because of our situation. We'll be fine." It was pride talking, Charlie realized, the same kind of pride that had kept him from accepting help after Elena died, the same stubborn independence that made someone choose struggle over charity. What if it wasn't temporary? He heard himself asking. Sophia's eyes widened. What? What if I offered you a permanent position, full-time, with benefits and housing allowance? You and Emma could stay in the guest house out back. For a moment, Sophia looked like she was going to cry. Then her expression shuttered, and Charlie recognized the look of someone who'd learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. Why? She asked quietly. You could hire anyone. Someone with better qualifications, better references, because in 2 days, you've done something 6 professional nannies couldn't do in 4 months, Charlie interrupted. You made my sons happy. You made this house feel like home again. What he didn't say was that she was making him feel things he thought he'd buried with Eleanor, and that scared him almost as much as it intrigued him. That afraid to us, 5. 2 weeks into their new arrangement, Sophia was beginning to realize that Charlie Morgan was not like any employer she'd ever had. For one thing, most employers didn't have men in expensive suits showing up at all hours for mysterious meetings in the study. Most employers didn't receive phone calls that made them speak in clipped, dangerous tones, and most employers definitely didn't have security cameras in every corner of the house and armed guards who nodded respectfully when Charlie walked past. "Mommy," Emma whispered as they watched yet another black car pull through the front gates. "What kind of work does Charlie do?" It was a question Sophia had been asking herself more frequently. Charlie had mentioned investments and business ventures, but she was starting to suspect there was more to it than that. The way Marcus and the other security guards deferred to him, the expensive artwork, the phone calls that made him pace like a caged animal, it all pointed to something bigger than real estate or tech startups. "I think he helps people with their money," Sophia said, which wasn't technically a lie. "Like a banker?" Before Sophia could answer, the front door opened and Charlie walked in with a man she'd never seen before, tall, thin, with the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time indoors. Charlie's jaw was tight, and there was something in his posture that made Sophia instinctively step closer to the children. "We need to discuss the timeline," the stranger was saying as they passed through the foyer. "My clients are getting impatient." "Your clients can wait," Charlie replied, his voice carrying an edge that made Sophia's skin prickle. "I told you I need 2 more weeks. 2 weeks might be too long, especially if Romano finds out what we're planning." Sophia felt her blood run cold. Romano. She'd heard that name before, whispered in her old neighborhood with the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters. Vincent Romano ran the docks, controlled half the construction in the city, and had a reputation for dealing with problems in ways that kept people from becoming problems again. The men disappeared into Charlie's study, and Sophia found herself staring at the closed door with a sick feeling in her stomach. "Sophia?" Mason tugged on her sweater. "Can we have snacks now?" "Of course, sweetheart," she managed, but her mind was racing. If Charlie was involved with Romano in any way, if he was part of that world— "Emma, can you help the boys wash their hands while I get the apple slices ready?" Sophia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. In the kitchen, she tried to focus on normal things, cutting fruit, pouring milk, listening to the children chatter about their afternoon plans. But she couldn't shake the memory of that conversation, couldn't stop thinking about the implications. 20 minutes later, Charlie emerged from his study alone. The stranger was gone, but the tension in Charlie's shoulders remained. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked carefully. Charlie looked at her for a long moment, and she had the strangest feeling he was trying to decide how much truth she could handle. "Just business complications," he said finally. "Nothing you need to worry about." But the way he said it, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her, made Sophia worry more, not less. That night, after Emma was asleep in their new bedroom in the guest house, Sophia stood at her window and watched the main house. Lights were on in Charlie's study until well past midnight, and she counted 3 different cars coming and going through the gates. Whatever kind of business Charlie was involved in, it was the kind that kept a man awake at night and required armed security. And Sophia was starting to realize that by accepting his offer, she might have walked herself and Emma directly into the kind of danger she'd spent years trying to avoid. But as she watched Charlie pace past his study window, phone pressed to his ear, she also realized something else. She was starting to care about him more than was safe or smart, and in Charlie Morgan's world, caring about someone might be the most dangerous thing of all. 6. The morning everything changed started like any other. Sophia was making breakfast while the boys argued about whether dinosaurs could swim. Luke was convinced they could. Mason was equally certain they couldn't, and Noah was advocating for flying dinosaurs as a compromise, and Emma was helping by sorting silverware with the serious concentration of a surgeon. Charlie had been on a phone call since dawn, pacing between his study and the kitchen with increasing agitation. Sophia had caught fragments of conversation, something about shipments and schedules, and someone named Rodriguez who wasn't responding to calls. "Daddy sounds mad," Luke observed, pausing in his dinosaur dissertation to watch Charlie pace past the kitchen doorway. "He's just worried about work," Sophia said, but she was watching Charlie too. There was something different about his tension this morning, something sharper and more dangerous. When Charlie finally ended his call and joined them in the kitchen, his face was grim. "Boys, I need you to stay close to Sophia today," he said, his tone serious enough to catch their attention. "No playing in the yard, no walks to the park, just inside activities." "Why?" Mason asked. "Because Daddy says so," Charlie replied, and there was something final in his voice that made even Noah stop arguing about dinosaurs. Sophia felt ice form in her stomach. "Charlie, what's going on?" He looked at her and she saw him making the same calculation he'd made before how much truth she could handle. This time he seemed to decide on honesty. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. "Boys, can you go play in the living room for a few minutes? Stay where Sophia can see you." When the children were settled with puzzles and building blocks, Charlie led Sophia to his study. It was the first time she'd been inside the room, and she was surprised by how normal it looked: leather chairs, massive desk, bookshelves lined with what appeared to be actual books rather than decorative props. What wasn't normal was the wall of monitors showing feeds from security cameras positioned around the property. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this," Charlie began, then stopped and ran a hand through his hair. "What I do for a living isn't exactly conventional." Sophia looked at the monitors, at the images of armed men patrolling the grounds, at the sophisticated security setup, and felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. "You're in the Mafia," she said quietly. Charlie winced. "That's not the term we usually use, but yes. I run a family business that operates in certain grey areas of the law." "Grey areas?" Sophia's voice was flat. "Like what?" "Import-export, logistics, financial consulting." He paused. "Protection services." "Protection from what?" "Other people in similar businesses who don't always play by the rules." Sophia stared at him. Part of her wanted to grab Emma and run, to put as much distance as possible between her daughter and this world. But another part, a part that had spent the last 2 weeks watching Charlie read bedtime stories and help with homework and worry about whether his sons were eating enough vegetables, couldn't reconcile the man she'd come to know with the criminal he was describing. "The conversation I overheard yesterday," she said, "about Romano. Vincent Romano has been trying to muscle in on our territory for months. We've been negotiating, but—" Charlie glanced at the monitors. "Let's just say negotiations aren't going well. And you brought us here, you brought Emma here." Sophia's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "This is the safest place I know," Charlie said quickly. "These walls, this security system—" "This is a war zone," Sophia interrupted. "You made us part of a war zone." "Sophia, please—" "No." She backed toward the door. "No, I need to think. I need to—" She stopped, looking at him. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Charlie was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because for the first time in 6 months I felt normal. When I watched you with my boys, when we sat around the dinner table, when Emma helped Luke with his puzzle yesterday, it felt like a regular family. I didn't want to ruin that." Sophia felt her heart crack a little. "Charlie, I know it's not fair to ask you to stay," he continued. "I know I should have told you from the beginning. But my sons are happier than they've been since their mother died, and you—" He met her eyes. "You made me remember what it feels like to want to come home at the end of the day." Outside the study window, Sophia could see the boys playing in the living room, their laughter carrying through the walls. Emma was showing them how to build a tower, her face bright with the kind of joy Sophia hadn't seen since before their world fell apart. "I need time to think," she said finally. Charlie nodded. "Take all the time you need. But Sophia, whatever you decide, I want you to know that these last 2 weeks, they've meant everything to me." 7. Sophia spent the night staring at the ceiling of her bedroom in the guest house, watching shadows move across the walls and thinking about choices. She thought about Emma's laughter, about the way the boys had started calling her Sophia Mom when they thought no one was listening, about the electricity she felt every time Charlie looked at her. She also thought about police sirens, about Emma asking why Mommy was crying, about the kind of future where loving someone meant constantly looking over your shoulder. By morning, she'd made her decision. "You're staying," Charlie said when she walked into the kitchen. It wasn't a question, somehow. He'd read the answer in her face. "I'm staying," Sophia confirmed, "but with conditions." Charlie poured coffee into 2 mugs, sliding one across the counter to her. "I'm listening. Complete honesty from now on. If there's danger, if something changes, if we need to leave, I need to know immediately." "Agreed. Emma and I get our own security detail. I won't have my daughter unprotected because of my choices." "Already arranged," Charlie said, and Sophia realized he'd been hoping she would stay. "And," she hesitated, then forced herself to continue, "we need to talk about what this is, this thing between us." Charlie went very still. "What thing?" "Don't." Sophia met his eyes directly. "Don't pretend you don't feel it too. The way you look at me, the way we are around each other, it's not just employer and nanny anymore. And we both know it." For a moment, Charlie looked like he was going to deny it. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and Sophia realized how much energy he'd been spending on maintaining the pretense. "It's complicated," he said quietly. "Everything worthwhile is complicated. Sophia, my world, the things I do, the people I deal with—" "I know what your world is like now," she interrupted. "And I'm still here." Charlie stared at her, and Sophia saw the exact moment he stopped fighting whatever had been building between them. He moved around the counter slowly, giving her time to step away. When she didn't, he reached up to cup her face in his hands. "I can't promise you safe," he said quietly. "I can't promise you easy." "I'm not asking for safe or easy," Sophia replied. "I'm asking for honest." When Charlie kissed her, it was nothing like the gentle, tentative first kiss she'd expected. It was desperate and hungry, and full of weeks of suppressed wanting. Sophia felt herself melting against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Daddy! Sophia!" Luke's voice made them spring apart, just as 3 sets of footsteps came thundering into the kitchen. "We made you pictures!" "And Emma helped," Noah added proudly. "Look, look!" Mason thrust a piece of construction paper covered in crayon drawings toward them. "It's our family." Sophia looked at the drawing and felt her throat tighten. There they all were, Charlie and the boys, Sophia and Emma standing in front of a house with a large sun overhead and flowers blooming in the yard. At the bottom, Emma had written in her careful second-grade handwriting, "Our new family." "It's beautiful," Sophia managed. "Emma said families are the people who take care of each other," Luke explained seriously. "So we're a family now, right?" Sophia looked at Charlie over the boys' heads and saw the same emotion reflected in his eyes that was threatening to overwhelm her. "Right," Charlie said, his voice rough. "We're a family now." What none of them saw was the black sedan that had been parked across the street since dawn, or the telephoto lens capturing their every movement through the kitchen window. By noon, Vincent Romano would have photos of Charlie Morgan's new weakness. And by evening, he would know exactly how to use them. 8. The attack came at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sophia was in the backyard with all 4 children, watching them play on the elaborate swing set Charlie had installed the previous week. Emma was pushing Luke on the tire swing, while Mason and Noah competed to see who could pump their legs higher on the regular swings. It was the kind of perfect autumn afternoon that made Sophia grateful for every choice that had led her here. The first sign something was wrong was when Marcus appeared at the back door, speaking urgently into his radio. The second sign was when 3 more security guards materialized from seemingly nowhere, forming a loose perimeter around the yard. "Sophia," Marcus's voice was calm but firm, "I need you to bring the children inside now." "What's happening?" Sophia asked, but she was already moving, her years of single parenthood having taught her to react first and ask questions later. "Daddy!" Noah called as they rushed toward the house. "We weren't done playing. We'll play more later," Sophia promised, ushering them through the back door. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice light. "Right now, we're going to play a new game called Stay Quiet and Safe." Inside, Marcus directed them to Charlie's study, the most secure room in the house. With its reinforced walls and separate security system, Charlie was already there, on the phone with someone, his free hand resting on what Sophia now realized was a gun safe built into his desk. "How many?" he was asking, as Sophia settled the children on the leather couch with tablets and headphones. 6 vehicles, multiple occupants. came the crackling response through his radio. "They're not trying to hide their approach." Charlie's jaw tightened. "Romano's making a statement." "Charlie," Sophia said quietly, moving close enough that the children couldn't hear. "What do we do?" "We wait," Charlie replied, but his eyes were on the monitors showing the front gates. "The house is secure, they can't get in." As if to contradict him, the sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere outside. Emma looked up from her tablet with wide eyes, and Sophia quickly moved to distract her. "Hey, sweetheart, remember that story you were writing yesterday? About the princess and the dragon? Can you tell it to the boys?" Emma nodded solemnly, understanding without being told that this was important. She began spinning an elaborate tale about a brave princess who made friends with dragons, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. Charlie spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating with his security team, while Sophia tried to process the surreal reality of her situation. 3 months ago, she'd been serving coffee to truckers at a highway diner. Now she was in a bulletproof room, while armed men fought for control of the property outside. "Status report," Charlie demanded. "So they're testing our perimeter," Marcus responded. "Probing for weak spots. Classic Romano tactics. He wants us to know he can reach us whenever he wants." "And our response?" "Defensive only, as ordered." "But sir," Marcus paused, "they've got Sophia and the children's photos. They're making it clear this isn't just about territory anymore." Sophia felt ice settle in her veins. "They know about us?" "Yes." Charlie's expression was grim. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid." The gunfire intensified for several minutes, then gradually died away. Charlie's radio crackled with updates from his team. The attackers were withdrawing, but slowly, making sure their message had been received. When the all-clear finally came, Charlie holstered his weapon and turned to face Sophia and the children. The boys had fallen asleep against Emma's shoulders during her story, exhausted by adrenaline they didn't understand. "Is it over?" Emma asked quietly. "For now," Charlie replied honestly. Sophia stood carefully, settling the sleeping boys more comfortably on the couch before moving to the window. The yard looked normal, swing set, still swaying slightly in the breeze, flowers still blooming in their carefully tended beds, but she could see the scorch marks on the front gates, the broken glass where bullets had found their targets. "This is what your life is like," she said, not quite a question. "Not usually this direct," Charlie admitted. "Romano's escalating because he's desperate. We've been cutting into his revenue streams, and he's running out of options." "So what happens now?" Charlie was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Sophia turn to look at him. "Now I end this," he said, "before it gets worse." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to have a conversation with Vincent Romano that settles things permanently." Sophia stared at him, understanding the implications even though he hadn't spelled them out. "Charlie, no, there has to be another way." "Not anymore." Charlie's voice was gentle but absolute. "He threatened my family today. He threatened you. That's a line he never should have crossed." For the first time since this had started, Sophia truly understood the world Charlie lived in, a world where love could be a weapon used against you, where protecting the people you cared about sometimes meant doing things that kept you awake at night. "Promise me something," she said quietly. "Anything. Promise me you'll come back to us." Charlie crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. "I promise," he whispered against her hair. "I'll always come back to you." 9. The warehouse on the east side of the city had been neutral ground for 15 years, a place where men like Charlie and Romano could meet to discuss business without bloodshed. Tonight, Charlie wasn't sure the old rules would hold. He arrived with only Marcus, leaving his larger security detail behind as a show of good faith. Romano was already there, flanked by 2 men Charlie recognized from surveillance photos, both with reputations for solving problems with violence. "Charlie," Romano said, his voice carrying the kind of false warmth that preceded betrayal, "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show." "Vincent." Charlie kept his own tone neutral. "You wanted to talk. Let's talk." They faced each other across the empty space, 2 men who'd spent decades navigating the shadows of legitimate business. Romano was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that spoke of success built on other people's misery. "You know why we're here," Romano continued. "This territory dispute has gone on long enough. My proposal is simple. You withdraw from the docks, I withdraw from downtown. We each keep what we can hold." "That's not why we're here," Charlie replied quietly. "We're here because you threatened my family." Romano's smile didn't reach his eyes. The children, you mean? Lovely boys, and that woman Sophia, isn't it? Very pretty. Your late wife was prettier, of course, but Charlie moved faster than Romano expected, crossing the distance between them in 2 quick steps and grabbing the older man by the throat. Romano's guards reached for their weapons, but Marcus's gun was already drawn. You don't speak about my wife, Charlie said, his voice deadly calm. And you don't speak about Sophia. You don't think about them. You don't look at their pictures. You don't drive past their home. They don't exist in your world. Romano clawed at Charlie's hand, his face reddening. You can't protect them. Forever. Watch me. Charlie released him and stepped back. Here's my counter-proposal, Vincent. You disappear. Tonight. Take your operation and find a new city. Because if I see you or any of your people within 100 miles of here again, I won't be having conversations. You're making a mistake, Romano gasped, rubbing his throat. I have resources you don't understand. Connections that go higher than you think. And I have something you'll never understand, Charlie replied. I have everything to lose, which makes me more dangerous than you'll ever be. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for the sound of Romano's labored breathing. Then Romano straightened his jacket and nodded to his men. This isn't over, Morgan. Yes, Charlie said quietly. It is. After Romano and his men left, Charlie stood in the empty warehouse, feeling the weight of what he'd just set in motion. Romano wouldn't just disappear, men like him never did. But he would be more careful now, more calculating, which gave Charlie time to do what needed to be done. Sir? Marcus holstered his weapon. Your orders? Charlie pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Federal agent Sarah Chen had been trying to build a case against Romano for 3 years. Charlie had information that could give her what she needed: doc records, financial documents, enough evidence to put Romano away permanently. It would mean exposing some of his own operations, accepting some consequences he'd managed to avoid. But it would also mean Sophia and the children could sleep safely. I'm making a deal, Charlie said, dialing the number. One that's going to change everything. Back at the house, Sophia was pacing the living room while Emma and the boys slept upstairs. Every car that passed made her heart jump. Every shadow outside made her move closer to the windows. When she finally heard the sound of Charlie's car in the driveway, she nearly collapsed with relief. Is it finished? She asked when he walked through the door. Charlie pulled her into his arms and held her tight. It's finished, he said against her hair. Romano won't be a problem anymore. What did you do? What I had to do to keep you safe. Sophia pulled back to look at his face. Charlie, what aren't you telling me? He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. I made a deal with the FBI. Romano's going to prison, but some of my operations are going to be scrutinized. Things are going to change. Change how? I might have to step back from certain parts of the business. Focus on the legitimate investments. Let other people handle the gray areas. Sophia stared at him. You're going legitimate? For us? For us, Charlie confirmed. For the chance to be the kind of man my sons can be proud of. The kind of man you deserve. When Sophia kissed him this time, it tasted like promises and new beginnings, and the kind of hope she'd almost forgotten how to feel. They were going to be okay. All of them. 10. 2 months later, Sophia woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen. She stretched luxuriously in the bed she now shared with Charlie, still amazed by how normal this life had become. The boys were healthy and happy. Emma was thriving in her new school, and Charlie had indeed stepped back from the more dangerous aspects of his business. Everything was perfect, which should have been her first warning that something was wrong. Sophia padded downstairs in Charlie's old NYU t-shirt, expecting to find the usual morning chaos of breakfast preparation and homework supervision. Instead, she found the kitchen empty except for a pot of coffee and a note on the counter. Took the kids to get donuts. Back in an hour. See. Sophia smiled, pouring herself coffee and settling at the counter to enjoy a rare moment of quiet. Outside, she could see Marcus and 2 other guards making their usual rounds of the property. Everything looked normal. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Look outside your bedroom window. Sophia's blood went cold. She ran upstairs, her bare feet silent on the hardwood, and peered carefully through the bedroom curtains. A black van was parked across the street. As she watched, a figure in the passenger seat raised what looked like a camera with a telephoto lens. Her phone buzzed again. Romano sends his regards. We have your family. Sophia's hands shook as she dialed Charlie's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Marcus. Voicemail. She tried the main security line. Nothing. Her phone rang and she grabbed it desperately. Charlie? Not quite. The voice was unfamiliar, cold. But I do have something that belongs to you. Where are they? Sophia's voice came out as a whisper. Somewhere safe for now. Romano wants to have a conversation with Charlie Morgan, but it seems Mr. Morgan has been avoiding his calls. Romano's supposed to be in federal custody. The man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Federal custody is temporary. Loyalty is forever. Romano has friends, Mrs. Martinez. Friends who believe in settling debts. Sophia sank onto the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What do you want? Simple. Charlie Morgan meets Romano tonight alone at the old Sullivan Steel building on the waterfront. He comes armed with whatever information he gave to the feds, plus a written confession detailing his own illegal activities. And if he doesn't? Well, let's just say 4 children would be a terrible thing to lose. The line went dead. Sophia stared at her phone, her mind racing. Romano must have been released on bail or escaped, or it didn't matter how. What mattered was that he had Charlie and the children, and he was using them as bait for a trap that would destroy the man she loved. She could call the FBI, but that would take time they didn't have. She could call Charlie's remaining security team, but she didn't know who else might be compromised. Or she could do something incredibly stupid and dangerous. Sophia was reaching for her car keys when her phone buzzed with another text. This one included a photo that made her heart stop. Charlie was tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. His face bloody, but his eyes alert and furious. Behind him she could see Emma and the 3 boys huddled together on the floor, Emma's arms wrapped protectively around the younger children. The text that followed was simple. 1 hour. Sophia grabbed her purse and headed for the door. She had no plan, no weapons, no backup, but she had something Romano didn't expect. She had nothing left to lose, and sometimes that was the most dangerous thing of all. 11. The Sullivan Steel building had been abandoned for 5 years, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls making it the perfect location for the kind of meeting that left people permanently missing. Sophia parked her car 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows and abandoned vehicles for cover. She'd made 2 stops on her way here. The first was at a hardware store, where she'd purchased a crowbar, heavy-duty wire cutters, and road flares. The second was at a gas station, where she'd filled a small can with gasoline and bought a disposable lighter. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was what she had. Sophia circled the building, looking for alternate entrances and escape routes. The main floor was where they'd be holding the meeting. She could see light spilling from windows that should have been dark, but there had to be another way in. She found it on the east side, a loading dock with a broken rolling door that she could squeeze under. Inside, the building was a maze of rusted machinery and empty offices, but she could hear voices echoing from somewhere deeper in the structure. Moving as quietly as she could, Sophia made her way toward the sound, using the flashlight on her phone sparingly to navigate the debris. As she got closer, she could make out individual words. "Told you this was how it would end." Romano's voice, smug and satisfied. "You thought you could betray family and walk away clean. The only family I have is in this room." Charlie's voice, hoarse but defiant. "And if you hurt them, I'll kill you with my bare hands." Touching, but unfortunately, Mr. Morgan, you're not in a position to make threats. Sophia reached a point where she could see into the main area through a gap in the wall. Charlie was exactly where he'd been in the photo, tied to a chair in the center of the space. The children were against the far wall, guarded by 2 armed men. Emma was still holding the boys, whispering something to them that Sophia couldn't hear. Romano stood in front of Charlie, flanked by 4 more men. Too many for a direct confrontation, even if Sophia had been trained for that kind of thing, which meant she needed a distraction. Sophia retreated back into the maze of machinery, working her way toward what she hoped was directly above where the children were being held. The building's 2nd floor was partially collapsed, but there were still support beams and fire escapes that might give her the angle she needed. 20 minutes later, she was positioned on a catwalk that overlooked the main floor, her supplies arranged around her like weapons in a war she'd never wanted to fight. Step 1. Create chaos. Sophia cracked the road flares and threw them into different corners of the building. The brilliant red light and hissing smoke immediately drew shouts of alarm from Romano's men. Step 2. Level the playing field. While the guards were distracted by the flares, Sophia used the wire cutters to slice through the electrical cables she'd found running along the catwalk. Half the building plunged into darkness. Step 3. Reduce their numbers. Sophia poured gasoline over a section of old wooden pallets and dropped the lighter. The flames caught immediately, spreading fast enough to make the men near that section retreat toward the center of the building, where Charlie and the children were located. "What the hell is happening?" Romano shouted over the growing chaos. "Sir, we need to evacuate," one of his men called. "The building's not safe. We're not leaving until—" A section of the ceiling chose that moment to collapse, sending a shower of debris raining down near Romano's position. In the confusion that followed, Sophia saw her chance. She dropped from the catwalk, landing hard on the concrete floor, but rolling to absorb the impact the way Emma's gymnastics coach had taught her daughter. Her ankles screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move, crawling through the smoke and chaos toward the children. "Emma," she whispered urgently when she reached them. "Are you hurt?" "Mommy!" Emma's voice was small and scared, but she was alert. "How did you—" "No time," Sophia interrupted, cutting through the zip ties that bound their hands. "When I say run, you take the boys and go straight for that hole in the wall. Don't stop, don't look back. My car is 3 blocks east." "What about Charlie?" Luke asked, his small face streaked with tears. Sophia looked across the chaos to where Charlie was still tied to his chair, Romano standing over him with a gun drawn despite the flames and smoke surrounding them. "I'll get Charlie," she promised, "but I need you to be brave and run when I tell you to." "Ma'am," one of the guards had spotted her. "Ma'am, stop right there." "Run!" Sophia shouted. Emma grabbed Mason and Noah's hands while Luke clung to her shirt, and they bolted for the opening Sophia had used to enter. The guard raised his weapon, but Sophia was already moving, using the crowbar to knock him off balance before diving toward Charlie. "Sophia!" Charlie's voice was raw with panic and something that might have been pride. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving my family," Sophia replied, sawing through his restraints with the wire cutters, while bullets whined overhead and the building burned around them. When Charlie's hands were free, he pulled Sophia against him and kissed her hard, tasting like smoke and fear and desperate love. "I told you I'd come back to you," he said against her mouth. "Next time," Sophia replied, "we leave together." 12. 1 year later, Sophia stood in the kitchen of their new house, a sprawling ranch in the suburbs, with a 3-car garage, a swimming pool, and most importantly, no bulletproof walls or armed guards patrolling the perimeter, watching Charlie attempt to flip pancakes while 3 4-year-olds provided loud commentary on his technique. "Daddy, that one looks like a cloud," Noah observed. "A really weird cloud," Mason added helpfully. "All clouds are weird," Luke said with the authority of someone who'd given the matter serious thought. "That's what makes them clouds." "Your father is many things," Sophia said, rescuing the spatula from Charlie's grip, "but a pancake artist is not one of them." "Hey," Charlie protested, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "I've been practicing." "Practicing what? Modern art?" Emma looked up from her homework at the kitchen table, where she was working on a report about community helpers. "Charlie, what do I put for your job? Mom says you help people with their money, but that seems too simple." Charlie met Sophia's eyes over Emma's head. It was a conversation they'd had many times over the past year, how to explain his transformation from crime boss to legitimate businessman in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "I help people invest their money wisely," Charlie said carefully. "I look for companies that make good products and help them grow, so the people who invest make money too." It was actually true. Romano's arrest and trial had ended with him sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, and Charlie's cooperation with the investigation had earned him immunity for his past activities in exchange for testifying and divesting from all illegal operations. He'd used his remaining resources to start a private investment firm that specialized in identifying and funding promising startups. It was cleaner work than what he'd done before, and considerably less lucrative in the short term. But watching Sophia smile as she flipped perfect heart-shaped pancakes for their children made it the best career change he'd ever made. "That sounds boring," Luke announced, having apparently been eavesdropping on the conversation. "Not boring," Charlie corrected. "Peaceful. Is that why we don't have the tall fence anymore?" Mason asked. "And why Marcus doesn't carry the scary phone?" Noah added. Sophia looked at Charlie questioningly. The boys had been asking more questions lately about their old life, about why they'd moved and why certain security measures were no longer necessary. They decided to answer honestly, but age-appropriately. Yes, Daddy used to do work that could be dangerous, but now he did different work that kept their family safe. That's exactly why, Charlie confirmed. Sometimes people change the kind of work they do so they can spend more time with the people they love. Like how Sophia changed from working at the restaurant to taking care of us? Luke asked. Exactly like that. Sophia felt her throat tighten. Taking care of Charlie's boys had never felt like work, but she understood what Luke meant. A year ago, she'd been a single mother struggling to keep her head above water, terrified about the future and fighting to provide basic necessities for Emma. Now she was part of a family that felt more real and solid than anything she'd ever experienced. Speaking of taking care of people, Charlie said, reaching into his pocket, I have something for Sophia. Sophia turned in his arms, expecting to find a small gift, or maybe a silly note. Charlie had been leaving her little surprises for months, tokens of affection that reminded her daily how much he loved her. Instead, she found him holding a small velvet box. The kitchen went completely silent, except for the sound of pancakes sizzling on the griddle. Charlie, Sophia breathed. Sophia Martinez, Charlie said, his voice steady, but his hands slightly shaking. You saved my sons, you saved my life, and you showed me what it means to be part of a real family. You're brave and beautiful and strong enough to terrify armed criminals with a crowbar and a can of gasoline. Don't forget the road flares, Emma added helpfully. And the road flares, Charlie agreed, smiling. Will you marry me? Sophia stared at the ring, a simple, elegant solitaire that caught the morning light streaming through their kitchen windows, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she'd knocked on a stranger's door to check on a crying woman. Now she was standing in her own kitchen, surrounded by children she loved as much as her own daughter, being proposed to by a man who'd changed his entire life to build a safe future with her. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes! The kitchen erupted in cheers as Charlie slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, while their children bounced around them, shouting about weddings and cake and whether they could all wear matching tuxedos. Later, after the pancakes were eaten and the boys were down for naps and Emma was playing in the backyard, Sophia and Charlie sat on their front porch, watching their quiet suburban street and marveling at how normal their life had become. Do you miss it? Sophia asked, her head on Charlie's shoulder, her engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. The excitement, the power, the intensity of your old life. Charlie was quiet for a moment, considering. I miss the simplicity sometimes, he said finally, when problems could be solved with money or intimidation. But then Luke brings me a drawing he made, or Noah wants to tell me about his day, or I watch you help Mason with his reading, and I remember what I was really missing, which was this, a reason to come home that had nothing to do with business or territory or proving anything to anyone. He tilted her chin up so he could see her face. I used to think power meant controlling everything around me. Now I know it means having something worth protecting. Sophia smiled, thinking about their unconventional love story, the Mafia boss and the single mom who found each other in the midst of chaos and chose to build something beautiful together. I love you, Charlie Morgan, she said. I love you too, future Mrs. Morgan, he replied, and in the distance they could hear their children laughing as they played together in a backyard that belonged to them, in a life that was completely, wonderfully ordinary. It was the most extraordinary thing either of them had ever experienced.